Welcome back. I got myself some coffee, which I hadn't had before, and so hopefully I'll be smarter now. Although coffee actually doesn't really help a whole lot, I found. But at least I feel like I'm smarter. I don't think I actually am, but I feel like it. Second one of the morning. Just this is a good old warm up in coronavirus New York. Might as well sit and read some philosophy. Okay, so we just did a new cosmological argument from grounding. And hey, back to the possible part of Gödel's ontological proof. You know, we just did the another ontological argument, and this one is also another ontological argument for theism. Let's see if this is available. Yeah, baby. Excellent. I like it. I like it a lot. So, as always, you can, if you're in the chat, you type in exclamation point paper, and it will the link to this fill paper page will show up. And that means you can, if you're here, you can just, it's easy to get to. Let's see, so let me load this one up. Did I not hit save? I must not have hit save. Hit save, would you? Save. So this is like the ontology argument morning. Okay, so we've got a LaTeX. Maybe I'll zoom in a little. Whoa, it's a little crazy. All right. Okay, let's ignore the abstract because whatever. Yeah, because who cares? All right. So, oh yeah, let's just also make a nice little update so the video looks good. There we go. And so now we can get going. In its classic modal form, the ontological proof runs as follows. The possibility claims. It is possible that something godlike exists. The necessity claim. That something godlike exists strictly entails that it is necessary that something godlike exists. Therefore, something godlike exists. Awesome. Given some standard principles of modal logic, the proof is valid. Yet the possibility claim is questionable. Maybe the properties needed to be godlike are inconsistent, and if they are, it's impossible that something godlike exists. Notably, Gödel, of much fame, does not assume the possibility claim in his version of the ontological proof. Rather, his proof demonstrates the possibility of thereby being something godlike. He does this first by proving the following principle, which, in addition to any potential theistic implications, is interesting in its own right. The possible instantiation of the positive. If a property is positive, then it is possible that there exists something that has that property. A positive property, in Gödel's terms, is a property that is positive in the moral aesthetic sense. Presumably, a positive property in this sense is a good-making property, but not necessarily a basic good-making property. That is, a property such that the properties it entails together rate on balance the possessor a plus. Gödel also suggests that positive properties can be interpreted as perfective properties, that is, purely good-making properties. A positive property in this alternative sense is presumably a property such that it entails some basic good-making properties and no other properties except those entailed by basic good-making properties. I fear this may be a tongue-twister paper. Given the possible instantiation of positive and the further premise that the property of being godlike is positive, we have that it is possible that there exists something godlike. There are two versions of Gödel's ontological proof. One version is contained in 2 pages of handwritten notes by Gödel from February 1970, and a more elaborate version is contained in 3 pages written by Dana Scott, who discussed the proof with Gödel that same month. Thank you, Dana Scott. In Scott's version, the proof that it's possible that there exists something godlike runs as follows, where P of phi means that property phi is positive. So, and we got a transparency of negation, so P of not phi is equal to not P of phi, and 2 P of phi, and necessarily for any phi of x and implies psi of x, then P of it implies P of psi of x. Okay, so we got a again with the parentheses, people. I mean, I know what this means, but frankly, if you're doing this in real time, it's hard. Maybe if you're sitting there, but in real time, I'm just reading left to right. I don't know where the main connective is. Like, is it this one? Or is it this one? I don't know when I'm reading. Okay, that's just problems that only I have. Okay, I'm sorry to complain about them. I will stop whining. If we adopt 1 and 2 as axioms, we can derive the possible instantiation of the positive, which can be stated formally as follows. 3. Positive phi P of phi implies possible exists phi of x. So you get this existential in here that you didn't have before. Whoa. Gödel's ontological proof then proceeds with the axiom that the property of being godlike is positive. That is, let G be the property of being godlike, P of G. And finally, from 3 and 4, we have it's possible there exists something G of X. So it's possible that there is something that is God. Hence the idea to derive the possible instantiation of the positive from axiological principles such as 1 and 2. Then, given the possible instantiation of the positive and the premise that the property of being godlike is positive, we have that it's possible that there exists something godlike. In this paper, I shall argue that the assumption in Gödel's proof of the possible instantiation of the positive, that is, assumptions 1 and 2, are implausible, and moreover, that the alternative proofs in the literature also rely on implausible assumptions. Nevertheless, I shall present a new proof which only relies on plausible axiological principles. Finally, I argue that there is still room for doubt about the substantial axiological assumption in Gödel's proof of the possibility claim. It is not clear why we should accept premise 4, which is the possibility of God. That God is a positive. That God is a positive thing. Whatever the understanding of positive actually amounts to. Because we were just talking the other day about proximal results. So we don't actually have any idea about the extent of what counts as good or bad under our finite sample size of the world. But anyway, some objections, revisions, and further objections. Okay, objections, revisions, and more objections. C. Anthony Anderson objects to the right to left direction of 1. Let M be the property of being male. This property seems indifferent in the sense that we seem to have both not positive male and not positive not male, which violates 1. Okay, so it says there's a problem with the transparency of negation related to positivity. Okay, that makes sense, because you want to, like, not positive, you might want to flip that to negative. So there's sort of like so it's sort of like the T schema where you've got positive, not true, not true, but then you might also want to have not true be false, depending on how you slice things. Okay, so that makes sense. Anderson shows that for the purpose of the proof of possible instantiation of the positive can be weakened as follows. Positive phi implies not positive not phi. So this would be, instead of not Yeah, okay, so let's keep going. This revision allows that not positive M and not positive not M, since it drops the problematic right to left direction of 1. Moreover, 6 mirrors a plausible principle on the logic of intrinsic value, namely the principle that if a state of affairs is intrinsically good, its negation is not intrinsically good. And the combination of 2 and 6 entails 3. Okay, so maybe you can just do this weakening instead of having like the definition of the biconditional, whatever that be. Yeah. Peter Hayek, however, objects to 2. Let D be the property of being devil-like. From 2 and P of G, we have that P positive, good, or God or devil. So it's positive that God or devil. Well, G is arguably positive. G or D is not. I don't know. Well, arguably. I don't know about this. I mean, wouldn't God overrule the devil in positivity in most theological schemes? I mean, it would still be net positive. It may not be massively net positive, but it'd still be net positive. So, granted, you should never take my word on theology. I have no idea what I'm talking about. There seems to be no reason to regard a disjunction of a positive property and a negative property as a positive rather than negative. Well, in this case, I would actually say yes, as I just said. But let's see. Let's see. Okay. Oh, God. Yeah, see, you got the long footnote here. I'm trying to see. Yeah, this is discussable. This is definitely... Yeah, the problem is... Okay. So, just for a more general discussion, you'd have to then start quantifying good positivity and negativity to then do some sort of calculation a la Pascal or something. Alright. Moreover, it seems that a tautological disjunctives like God or not God are not positive, even if one of their disjuncts is positive. Well, see, yeah, I mean, but if like God and that's like, well, plus infinity or minus infinity, you could say they cancel or something, but who knows. Furthermore, it seems that the logic of negativity should be analogous to that of positivity. That is, if negative phi means that property phi is negative in the moral aesthetic sense, then if 2 holds, the following principle should hold 2. Negative phi n for all x, phi of x implies psi of x, then psi is negative. So all the things that follow from psi should also be negative if phi is negative. Being godlike seems positive and being devil-like seems negative. But from positive God, negative devil, 2 and 7, we both have positive good or devil and negative good or devil, which violates the principle that a property cannot be both positive and negative. So we've got, yeah, this is a excluded middle here. Yeah, so okay, again, it would depend on yeah, you'd have to have some sort of numerical quantification quantities that would so because then otherwise negative phi might just be false, and then it'd just be positive phi because if the good over the goodness of God overwrites the badness of the devil. Don't know, but this is so but if you're just gonna do it at this level, then the bivalence seems to be plausible. It's just like true and false, and so you want to say not something both being true and false. It mirrors the standard principle of logic of intrinsic value, namely the principle that no state of affairs is both intrinsically good and intrinsically bad. Yeah. Hayek puts forward the following replacement for 1 and 2 and 6. Positive phi and necessarily for all things that are x implies psi implies, okay, so it's the not positive not psi, so it's a weaker version. As you're not saying it's positive, you're saying it's not the opposite's not negative or whatever. With 9 rather than 2, we no longer have P good or devil from P of G, so 9 avoids the problem above. Moreover, 9 entails 3 by itself, thus 9 is sufficient to derive 3 and avoids the previous problems. Yeah, so if there's something that's derivable, then you'd say it's not positive. Yeah, so it's not positive that not phi. So you've got this embedded negations, and since negation is not any more transparent, then you can't get the you can't do the mover. You can't move stuff around and get the nice, neat results that were causing problems before. Thus, 9 is sufficient to derive 3 and avoids the previous problems. But 9 is implausible. It faces a variation of the previous counterexamples. Yeah. Or at least it does so on the good-making interpretation of positivity. Let K be the property of being all-knowing, and considering the conjunctive properties K and M, and K and not M, that is, the property of being all-knowing and male, and the property of being all-knowing and not male. Since K seems positive and each one, M and not M, seems neutral, each of the conjunction properties should be overall positive. So, yeah, but you see, this is what's interesting. This is what I was saying earlier, that it should be the overall positive here. But let's see what happens. Since K and M and K and not M are mutually exclusive, then we have this complicated formula where you're going to have... Alright, so... whatever's. Plausibly, if a property is positive, then the complement of that property is also positive. Yeah, so you're going to... Since they were screwing with the transparency of negation, then you're going to have to... They can pull out a bunch of negations, since a lot of them, but then you're going to have some problems with the double negation cancellation. Okay, so if you keep adding in negations, you eventually get tripped up is what happens. So it seems like there's some problem here. Property is also positive that P of phi implies P of not phi, which seems reasonable, but that doesn't quite get you what you want, because you eventually can pull on the negations out then. Alright. And you can't get a contradiction. Yeah. But again, this is assuming these things are mutually exclusive. See, you're assuming bivalence, which is in some sense pulling the negation out somehow, because you're checking on the truth value or the positivity value within the scope of the positivity operator here, which normally you should be able to do. You should be able to be compositional and check the sub-formulas values before doing the bigger formulas values. But yeah, so that would be, maybe there's something to be said about sub-formulas of positivity. Maybe you again need to check net positivity, and net positivity can't be done in the sub-formulas. Sure. But okay, again, by embedding too many negations and changing the negation rules, you can move stuff around given plausible formulas, and then you get yourself the contradiction just the same. Okay. It may be objected that it's not obvious why we should accept both 10 and 11. Okay, very on top of my problems, especially on pure good-making interpretation of positivity. Perhaps we shouldn't grant that the conjunctive properties with positive and neutral conjuncts are positive. Well, okay, that's one way to go. Moreover, note that if we accept both 10 and 11, it follows directly that there is no godlike being with every positive property. Yeah. But again, this assumes that you're checking the sub-formulas for positivity. Because then as long as the thing, if you're only checking positivity at the end of the formula, then like if just because God's in there should override all the other like silliness, anything else in the formula. So I'm just doing Pascal on this, like where God being infinitely good, or infinitely positive in this one. Like what sort of silliness in our world would override God's infinite goodness? So there's a question of how this measurement is being made in terms of sub-formulas, and also how it's being done in terms of I'm using the wrong camera, aren't I? Oh, how do you like that? Alright. My apologies for slightly poor graphics here. I was looking, I was like, I don't look as good as I normally do. Shucks. I'm not going to fix that now because it's working and it's not, yeah, because I have a external webcam, and the monitor webcam is also active right now. Anyway, so the subformula one, and then how do you actually the quantity of goodness attributed to the God property, or all-knowing, whatever the other God properties is. Yet there are a related, more general worry about 9. 9 was okay, yeah, where you start adding in negations in a different way. Well, more don't worry about 9. From 9 we have that any two properties are jointly consistent. Oh. So if the joint consistency of some of the positive properties needed in order to be godlike is in doubt, then 9 assumes the point at issue to some extent. Okay. If we have no reason to accept that any two positive properties are jointly consistent, we have no reason to accept 9. Okay, so you'd have to have all goods are somehow consistent, which is a good question. A cogent proof of the possible instantiation of the positive. As we have seen, earlier proofs of the possible instantiation of the positive rely on implausible assumptions. There is, however, a way to derive the possible instantiation from the positive from plausible axiological principles. Consider the axiom. It's not positive that lambda y is not equal to y. So lambda being any property. So any property is there is no non-identity property, I guess you could say. That is, the contradictory property of being self-different is not positive. This is a compelling axiom. I have absolutely no idea why this would be positive or negative. I have no intuition about self-different, being self-different as opposed to self-identical having any sort of positivity. Alright, but let's grant that it is a compelling axiom. It mirrors a plausible principle in the logic of intrinsic value, namely that contradictory states of affairs are not intrinsically good. Okay, I want to look at 14 for a second. Okay, von Richt, Hansen. Alright, well, I'll take von Richt's word for it for now. Gödel mentions in his proof, but does not adopt it as an axiom, deriving it instead from 2. Second, consider the axiom. For all x, 5x if and only if a psi of x implies p of psi if and only if positive of p of phi if and only if positive psi. Alright, so some sort of comprehension going on. The idea following Gödel is that if properties mutually entail each other, they are alike in positivity. Yeah. Like 16, this axiom mirrors a plausible principle in the logic of intrinsic value that equivalent states of affairs have the same intrinsic value. If two properties mutually entail each other, any goodness and badness that follow necessarily from one also follow necessarily from the other. Yeah, sorry, my comprehension, warning light radar went off when I saw stuff like this. So the properties should have the same necessary advantage and disadvantages and should be alike in intrinsic positivity. Okay, I'd buy this. For all it's necessary that for all the same things, again with the brackets, I'd like it if when reading this ahead of time, like when reading in real time, I'd like to make sure that it was like this, or is it like, let's assume that the highlight's a bracket. Oh, no, I'm going to need a second number sooner or later. Or does it go like this? So where's the what's the scope of the necessary in this? But I understand that most people are reading this in the comfort of their own home with a glass of scotch. I'm sitting here doing it live on the internet. Okay, where were we? But it seems reasonable that if two properties are mutually entail each other, that their goodness or badness follows the same. So you see that we can derive 3 from 16, 17, assume for proof by contradiction in the negation of 3. That not the case that for all phi, positive phi implies possibly there exists something 5x. From 18 we have, just push the negation in, and then we have by existential instantiation of that of phi to phi prime, Then from 20 we have the phi prime, and then we have the not possible to exist x phi prime. That's why I don't like reading logic, because there's no way for you to understand this if you're just listening. But I mean, from these two, yes, you can derive this. And from 22 we have the standard duality definitions of normal modal logic, which is for all x not phi prime of x. And from 23 we have binormal modal logic for all x, phi prime of x implies lambda y is not equal to y of x. Okay, this goes self-difference for... Alright, so self-difference is logically impossible. We have not this, and then by normal logic you can swap these things around, and then we have by normal logic you can have necessarily for all x phi of x if and only if not self-difference, and then what that implies for positive of phi prime is if and only if we have self-difference, and therefore we've derived not positive phi prime, and there we get a contradiction because we've got positive phi and not positive phi primes, both phi primes. So we've derived a contradiction from the assumption 18, that is the negation of 3. So we can conclude, assuming bivalence as per usual in these things, positive phi implies possibly there exists some phi of x. We have that 16 and 17 together entail the possible instantiation of the positive. Hence, the possible instantiation of the positive can be derived from plausible axiological principles. Excuse me. Talking screws you up. It really does. And I listen to podcasts, and there's one podcaster. Is this me? Oh, there's a giant footnote here. Sorry. And there's one podcaster, and he would always butcher people's names, and I never understood it. Like, can't you just try to get it right? It's like you're talking so much, it becomes impossible to even try to get. You just blow through. There's no point in even like thinking about it. Just blow through the words. Might as well. Things you learn just by doing. After the possibility part, Gödel's ontological proof proceeds with derivation of the necessity claim. That is, it's possible. It's necessary that there exists some god of x and if therefore implies material implication, possible that there exists something that god of x. His derivation relies on one further axiological principle, namely that if phi is positive, then it's necessarily positive. This principle is plausible, as Gödel notes. 32 seems to follow from at least the nature of the property, that is, the property of positivity. At least 32 seems to follow if the positivity is intrinsic positivity, which is what Gödel seems to have in mind in his proof, adding the note that positive means positive in the moral aesthetic sense, independent of the accidental structure of the world. Yet Gödel's derivation of the necessity claim also relies on some of the implausible axiological principles we have rejected. Hayek, however, proposes some amended proofs of the necessity claim, which do not rely on axiological principles. Hence, given the proposed patch to the possibility part, Gödel's ontological proof does not need any implausible axiological principles. So on the soundness of the proof depends on its substantial axiological premise, that is, premise 4, that being godlike on the relevant definition is positive. Unless one finds this premise independently plausible, however, one might worry that the plausibility of 4 depends, in light of the possible instantiation of the positive, on the consistency of the positivity properties needed in order to be godlike, and if it does, it seems Gödel's derivation of the possibility claim achieves very little. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I tend to have sort of questions I have about this stuff is the existential force of the backwards e-quantifier, standard stuff about that. Like, I treat it more like a particular quantifier. What does it mean as existence? I'm not exactly sure about any of that. We've got all these big footnotes here. I'm sure this is all right. Fitting and Mendelssohn. We got like these. Yeah, see, it's like, I'm sure there's something here, but otherwise, I mean, if you want to work through the logic, it seems interesting. It just seems to you have to have some sort of sense of what it means, positivity in logic, and how you are cashing that out. And it seems that also how negation operates in this case, because you're doing the bivalence of positivity and negativity. So it's like, if not positive, then it has to be negative. Not negative, has to be positive. And then also how you are measuring the quantity of positivity and negativity, and that you're doing it compositionally, which again are all normal things to be assumed the way that is being done here. But if you want to prove God by logic, you best understand some of the assumptions that you're making. Yeah. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I think I'll be back tonight, so I'll try to do that, and I'll probably just keep doing this until the end of, I'll keep my same schedule until I get burnt out, or the coronavirus allows me to leave the house. So, thanks for watching, and if you have any suggestions, comments, concerns, send me an email, leave a message in the chat, or at least when I'm here. Thanks, bye. Stay safe, folks.